Good evening. I'm glad you could join me for another Wednesday night devotion. It's hard to believe, but since this whole COVID-19 thing and we've had to restrict some of our services and our times together, this is the 32 Wednesday nights. We've been looking into the Psalms. Now, there were some other passages of Scripture early on as we dealt with COVID-19 and how to cope with stress and things that come into our lives. And we kind of turned to the Psalms, and I began to show you how to use that devotionally for your life, because it is so full of those kind of answers that we look for in times of distress, thanks to David, who faced a lot of distress. This psalm is taken from Psalm 28, verses 1 through 9. And like I said, this is written for December the 23rd, Wednesday night. And it is entitled, The Cry. And what do you do in times of trouble, tribulations, disappointments, struggles? Well, let's learn from David, which is why we have the Psalms in our Bible to turn to and learn to use devotionally to feed us individually. There's a lot of technical things there we could get into with a psalm, a lot of great stuff. I love that kind of stuff. But I'm trying to show you how to read the Psalms, let God speak to you as you pray, as you seek answers in His Word through these poetry, these songs of David. So I want to learn this evening from David, who faced all those things in his life. I mean, troubles in his government, troubles in his household, troubles in his personal life, troubles without, as his enemies surrounded him. And I love, there's an old King James passage, who stuck the lip out at him, that condemned him and judged him and talked about him behind his back. All kinds of things he faced. Well, what do you do in times of stress and times of troubles? That things aren't normal. And we love normal, although I don't know if things will get back to normal. There may be a new normal that we'll get adjusted to. But how do you improvise? How do you adapt? How do you overcome? What do you do when you find yourself in those troubling situations? So we have this, what I've entitled, The Cry of David. And verse 1 starts out that way. It says, this is a psalm of David. And right away, what does he do? To you I call, or cry out would be another good translation. To you, in the NIV, it's I call. To you I call, or cry out, O Lord, my rock. Do not turn a deaf ear to me, for if you remain silent, I will be like those who've gone down to the pit. David feels like he could end up in the pits. But before he gets in the pits, what's the first thing that you need to do? You need to cry out to God. See, that's what's so beautiful about the Psalms, about this poetry. Things that we know, but we need to be reminded of time and time again. David, in this situation in his life and facing these adversities within and without, when he faces those things, and rather than be discouraged, rather than go sing poor, poor, pitiful me, or woe is me, I think I'm going to eat worms, or running away from God, or trying to solve problems in our own strength, he runs to God. And he cries out. That's the powerful thing about this psalm. If you don't learn anything from this psalm today, that's what I want you to catch. Secondly, look at verse 2. Hear my cry for mercy as I call to you for help, as I lift up my hands toward your most holy place. Pray to God, but not just pray to God with a little prayer in your prayer request, with your whole life. He turned, cried out to God, and with holy hands lifted. I told you symbolically of having cleansed hands by the blood of sacrifice and by the cleansing at the altar. And then taking those hands and giving them to God. Say, God, take me. Do whatever you want with me. I'm yours. I'm lifting up holy hands. If you can use me. It's a total life surrendering into the hands of God for deliverance, for help, for mercy, because we know Him to be a merciful and a compassionate God. It is running to Him for salvation, for help, to be our stronghold, our strength. It's life on the rock, some have called it. It is where I go to. That rock is my refuge, my hiding place in a time of a storm. So as these storms of life came into David's life, he ran to the rock. Completely, totally, with his whole life. I lift up my hands toward your most holy place. I cry out for mercy as I call to you for help. That's powerful. Now, by contrast, so we can see that's poetry. He's going to contrast that way of going to God with others who don't do that. So by contrast, he says, to running to your most holy place, for crying out to mercies, he says, verse 3, don't drag me away with the wicked. And this is the way of the wicked. With those who do evil, who speak cordially with their neighbors, but harbor malice in their hearts. And that may be as a clue into some of the struggles and troubles that David was going through. Words hurt. And although people will be real friendly to King David, hey, David, how's it going? Kingdom doing okay? Behind his back, their neighbors harbor malice in their hearts. I wish that guy would die. Yeah. Wish he just dropped dead. So they speak one thing and harbor hatred, which is what malice is in their hearts. And so God said, what am I going to do with all these people? He's having people problems. And I know nobody here has people problems, right? He's having people problems. So he turns to God with his whole life, cries out to him, and says, for God to take care of it. Turn those people over to God. Because verse 4 says, repay them for their deeds and for their evil work. Repay them for what their hands have done, and bring back upon them what they deserve. In other words, I'm not going to be their judge. David isn't going to take vengeance into his own hands. He's going to give it to God and let God take care of them. They're God's people. He created them. They have choices just like David has choices to make. In the end, God's going to balance the scales. Hopefully, prayerfully, they'll get saved. And a little later, he's going to pray for people. But right now, that's God's business. I'm going to mind my business, which is my relationship to God. Walking in all of his ways, following him, loving my neighbor as myself. He says, repay them for what their hands have done. Bring back on them what they deserve. That's your job, God. Since they show no regard for the works of the Lord, and what his hands have done, he will tear them down and never build them up again. If they continue in this lifestyle of malice, toward people, but yet speaking cordially with their mouths, that hypocrisy and not respecting the works of God's hands, the things that he has created, including them, in the end, there will be only destruction for them. God will tear them down and never build them up again. And if anything, that should bring us compassion for them and hope and prayers that they get saved. Then fourthly, his cry and his prayer of faith, we see, is in the rock. And it is turned into praise. Now, wait a minute. We're only in verse 6. So this crying out to God about hypocritical people and people problems and the troubles he's faced in his life is turned to praise in 6 verses. I want that. Don't you want that for your life? How would you like to take those troubles and people problems that come into your life and in 6 verses and go into the Word of God and giving your life fully to follow him, praising and end up praising him, from crying out to praise. Praise be to the Lord, he says. And that's the word I am. To Yahweh, the I am. For he has heard my cry for mercy. Wow. Wow. God hears our prayers. Cry out. Pray in faith, believing that he hears our prayers and will answer our prayers and will help us. Maybe not all the time the way we think, but there is always deliverance in running to God. In fact, in this case, there's praise in the midst of adversity. He will turn your troubles into praise if you cry out to him, if you run to him in faith, believing him to be a God of mercy, a God who hears our prayers. from praise, or I should say from pain to praise. I think that's a prescription we all need from time to time. You know, we get sick and something hurts. We end up going to the doctor's office, or sometimes I'm not good at that. Well, I usually wait too long, but then I'm really hurting. And you go to the doctor's office and we look for a prescription. This is the prescription for the pain and troubles and people problems and things that come into our lives. The magic pill, the magic prescription for turning praise or pain into praise is crying out to God in faith, believing He hears our prayers, running to Him. And he says, in running to Him, not just to answer our prayer concerning these folks that are oppressing David and circle around him, both within his own household who want to take over his kingdom, and without his own household, but the Lord, he says in verse 7, is my strength and my shield. So we need strength in times like that. When we're facing all that adversity, where's that strength come from? It comes when I cry out to the Lord. And where's my shield? What's my defense against all of those things that are thrown at me in life? Well, it's my shield. And the Lord is my shield. I run to Him and hide behind Him. Let Him take care of it. He's the righteous judge. My heart, he says, trusts in Him. There's the faith. You got to have faith. You pray believing. My heart trusts in Him, and I'm helped. My heart leaps for joy, and I will give thanks to Him in song, which is what he's doing. He's writing a song, taking David's pain and people problems and turning it to praise and song. And with adding in there words like joy and the giving of thanks. Now wait a minute. He started out crying out to God because of all of these troubles. And verse 7, he's rejoicing and giving thanks and writing poetry. Song flows from his heart. The Lord is the strength of His people. You believe that? That's where the faith comes in. The Lord is the strength of His people. So go to Him to strength in times like these, in times like we're living in. He is a fortress of salvation, a saving God who's merciful and compassionate, a fortress, a walled fortress of salvation to run to for His anointed one. Of course, David was the anointed king. He just went through all that mess with Saul, and now he is the anointed king of Israel, but this may also be messianic. I said there's a lot of great things in here. You can spend a lot of time in this psalm, but it may also be looking forward to God's anointed one. Is God's anointed one Jesus, the Prince of Peace, the King of Kings? Is He going to have people problems? Yeah, like a bunch of folks yelling, crucify Him, crucify Him, and like the folks in His hometown going to throw Him off a cliff. Yeah. But David, in his own personal life, writing this psalm, is so close to the Lord, and when he gets in the Spirit, and he is rejoicing, and he's trusting God, and he's singing about God's words and claiming God's words of who God is. He's merciful and compassionate as He has revealed Himself in His word. It spills over, and we never know. David is like you never know. David talking about himself now, or has he drifted off and talking about the Lord, God using him as a vehicle to talk about the Messiah to come? So it's the beautiful intertwining there that we see. The Lord is the strength of His people, the fortress of salvation for His anointed one, David, and maybe the anointed one to come, who is a descendant of David and will sit on David's throne. And then finally, and sixthly, don't be selfish about it. Don't be selfish. The reason we go through troubles and struggles and trials in our lives and facing, I think, this last year in COVID-19, so God may call on us to help others later on down the line with what He taught us and how we learn to get through that in one piece, trusting God and praying to Him and crying out to Him. We can tell others and we can pray for them. You see, the things we learn aren't just for us. The things we learn, because that can be selfish. I'm just this storehouse and this library for me, because it's all about me. No, it's not all about me. I have other brothers and sisters out there struggling too. And what God shows me in this psalm, I try and share with them. And what I've learned in my life, by my failures even, and by my faults, God has helped to instruct me in that way and I can help others too who stumble and who fall and who struggle. But sixthly, he finally concludes this by praying for others. So don't just save me. I'm crying out to you to save me, my rock, to turn my pain to praise. But verse 9, save your people. There's lots of folks out there struggling. It ain't just about me, because we tend to think that everything revolves around us and my problems. Lots of folks have problems today. You know, I've went through a lot of sickness and things, and time to time this autoimmune arthritis puts me down, and I end up having to get that. I thought I was going to have to get my wheelchair out last week, but I ended up just getting my walker. I could not walk at all and was not doing well. Now I'm having a great day today. There are so many folks out there hurting so much worse than me. It's not about me. It's about others. A key word in the Christian life, others. And so in intercessory prayer, he ends this psalm that started out about his cry and his troubles, and he remembers, hey, there's others. Save your people. Bless your inheritance of all the multitudes of the earth. Be their shepherd. Guide them. Lead them like you guide and lead me. And carry them forever. And again, that messianic little twist there. Jesus, the good shepherd, who will come and lead his inheritance into that fortress of salvation, and will carry them when they're too tired to go the whole way, as he carries us and as we carry each other and help each other with each other's burdens, as we may have to carry somebody's rucksack for a while and bear each other's burdens, even though we all have our own burdens, but we help others along the way. That's how this psalm ends so beautifully. Cry out to God when in trouble, and then he goes through that whole process of faith and prayer and believing God will answer and giving himself wholly to the Lord and entering into that fortress, making God his rock, his hiding place in times of troubles, and with all these people problems being his pain concerning them being turned to praise. And then he turns to intercessory prayer, because it ain't just about me focusing on all my problems. And then when I look at other people's problems, my problems seem to get really, really small. And what a beautiful prayer. Save your people. Pray that today. We see all these folks out there in confusion and struggling and hurting and losing family members and going through sicknesses and economic problems and the political turmoil and all that's going on. The meanness, the grumpiness of people. Save your people. Bless your inheritance. Be their shepherd, guide and lead them, and carry them forever. What a beautiful prayer for our world today, in these days. So what do we learn from all this? In times of trouble, simply run to God. Cry out in faith. And don't forget to pray for others, because it's not always all about us. God bless us.